A reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5, verses 1 to 11. Once, while Jesus was standing beside the lake of Gennesaret, and the crowd was pressing in on him to hear the word of God, he saw two boats there at the shore of the lake. The fishermen had gone out of them and were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little way from the shore. Then he sat down and taught the crowds from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into the deep water and let down your nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we have worked all night long and have caught nothing. Yet if you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done this, they caught so many fish that their nets were beginning to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. But when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Go away from me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." For he and all who were with him were amazed at the catch of fish that they had taken. And so also were James and John, sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Do not be afraid. From now on you will be catching people." When they had brought their boats to the shore, they left everything and followed him. A reading from Psalm 90, verses 14 to 17. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, so that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad as many days as you have afflicted us, and as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and prosper for us the work of our hands. O prosper the work of our hands. Have you ever had an aha moment when what you were looking for became crystal clear? Do you remember what it felt like? The clearing of sight, the sharpening of focus, the elation of finding out something that was not visible or reachable beforehand. Do you remember how you figured it out? Was it by chance or by paying close attention? Epiphany is the season in the church year that emphasizes seeing the divine presence of God in the ordinary cycle of life. More specifically, though, it is in hearing and reading stories about Jesus, who reflects the divine presence of God. Through these stories specifically, we get a picture of Jesus through the lens of the Gospel of Luke, who writes to a more diverse audience comprised of both Jews and Gentiles. In Luke's Gospel, we see a Jesus who is like the Hebrew prophet Elijah. There are references to Elijah as well as stories about Jesus which are strikingly like the ones about Elijah. For example, Jesus' resurrection of the son of the widow of Nain. For Luke, Jesus is a powerful prophet in the ancestry of the great Hebrew prophets with the same charisma, passion, and power to affect the lives of people. This week, we read about the call of the first disciples in Luke. Unlike Matthew and Mark, who have Jesus calling disciples at the very beginning of his ministry before he has done any ministry, Luke's Jesus has already made an impact on the area. He speaks in his hometown and riles up the crowd by proclaiming the scope of his mission. He casts out demons and heals Peter's mother-in-law from illness. By the time he preaches to the people beside the Sea of Galilee, his reputation is soaring upward. It is in this context that he calls his first disciples to join him in carrying out his mission. It is clear to him that he will need help in teaching and preaching the good news to people around the countryside. As an aside, at the end of chapter 4, after retreating to a solitary place, people ask him to stay with them and continue his ministry of healing. He declines their offer by telling them that he must go on to other towns to preach the good news of God's dominion to fulfill his mission from God. It is important to note that at this point, Jesus faces temptation head on. He could have stayed, set up shop, been extremely busy and popular, and settled in for the long haul. He would have gotten accolades and adulation, which he was offered by the tempter in the wilderness, but he knew what he was supposed to do. He moved on to other places. After his preaching ended while in one of the fishing boats, he asked Peter to put down his nets into the water to catch some fish. Peter informed him that they had fished all night and came up empty. But, having witnessed Jesus healing his mother-in-law previously, puts the nets into the water, probably not expecting much. Lo and behold, they pull up so many fish the nets could not hold them all. They needed help to drag them all in. At this point, Peter has an aha moment. It becomes clear to him that in the presence of Jesus, he has seen and experienced the divine at work. Jesus then tells Peter not to be afraid. This is reminiscent of the angel's words to Mary and the shepherds earlier on. Implicit in this is also the exhortation that with God all things are possible. Jesus then invites them to catch people. By this, I think he means to capture their imagination and attention in becoming part of a movement which embodies the values and vision of life that God intended for God's people. Jesus had captured them by speaking to their deep desire for something more out of life. He spoke to and showed them in language that mirrored their life experience. They eked out a living daily under difficult circumstances. And like us, now in the middle of a pandemic, they were worried about their survival and did not have much energy left for other things. But Jesus' words and actions lit a spark within them, so much so that they left their work and immediately followed him. Do not be sidetracked by the notion that they left everything and followed him without a thought for their work, friends, and family. It produces feelings of guilt. Rather, see this as their chance to engage in something big with a lot of possibilities. They do not know what it will turn out to become, but it is rife with adventure. Remember how you felt when you had that aha moment. Insight and excitement at the same time, a knowing, if you will, that you were onto something bigger than yourself. For us, as readers and hearers of this story in the present time, what goes through our minds? How do we link this story into our story? What images do you see? What words tickle your ear? Does it conjure up anything at all? Perhaps you are not ready yet to see or hear. Sometimes we erect inner barriers to deflect or stop things from getting in or out for our protection from hurt or disappointment. Sometimes our prejudices strongly held feelings of thoughts get in the way. One of my theology professors once said that people will not hear God until they have hit rock bottom in their lives and their theology is in a pile at their feet. Then and only then will they hear or see the divine in their lives. I believe that the divine presence of God is working around us all the time. Whether we see it or not is up to us. How much attention do we put into seeing the divine working in the ordinary? Are we even looking for it? As the writer of Ephesians puts it, I pray also that the eyes of your heart may be enlightened, in order that you may know the hope to which he has called you, the glorious inheritance of the saints. Seeing with the eyes of your heart is a mystical image. It expresses the task of seeing deeply into life, beyond the surface, into the ground of things. It is like driving past an empty field and thinking that nothing is happening, but not knowing that life is always on the move, invisible molecules and particles and life forms we cannot see working. Epiphany is a revelation into something deeper at work in life. It is obvious to note that Jesus could have done much of the ministry by himself and been successful at it, but he built a community of people willing to run with kingdom vision of a better world for all. He inspired and empowered them for the task. He called and they answered. He calls us too, but we must be attentive and willing enough to answer the call. Will we pay attention by hearing and seeing beyond the surface and see the divine presence of God in every conversation and interaction we have in life?